What is up, guys? Welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing a review of Puss in Boots. I'm super excited to get into this one. This has got to be so far my favourite movie of 2023. This was absolutely fantastic. This movie came out in the UK, I believe, on February the 3rd, and obviously it's directed towards children, but me and my friend wanted to go and see it because of its positive reviews and its overall positive energy and what people have been saying about it. Now, I do have to say that energy is maintained by me. This movie was good. So the first thing that I want to mention is that I went into this not knowing a lot about the whole Shrek lore, okay, or the universe surrounding Shrek and Puss in Boots. Essentially, I went in there blind, not knowing anything about anyone or anything in that universe. That didn't really matter. The movie stood on its own 2 feet and presented a really cool story that was easy to follow, but also had some deep points and really shone some lights on some key points, and ultimately made the movie a little bit more thought-provoking than probably expected, and ultimately led to a better movie. So at the beginning of the movie, it kind of started with a high point in Puss in Boots' life, okay? He's surrounded by loads and loads of people who like him, surrounded by people who really enjoy his company, who are always telling him that he's the best and singing songs about him, about how he's fearless and all this kind of stuff. And everybody seems happy around him, everybody seems safe, and he defeats a giant with ease and ultimately is having a very good time. And you can kind of tell towards the beginning, Puss in Boots is a living legend, and he's living out his legend currently in a high point of his life. And I think this is definitely a necessary point within the movie that really gave it that driving factor, because he went from such a high point up here to going down low and becoming somebody that he used to be, essentially somebody that is amateur, and looking back on his high point, trying to maintain that, trying to win that back. And that's what this journey is essentially going through, changing his character to become a better, well-rounded person. And without that, I do have to say, I think this movie would have just lacked general narrative, would have lacked a direction, but instead it implements that really well. And it's crucial that they set the beginning of the movie as a high point. We see him slip down into one of his lower points and then eventually rise up above it all towards the end of the movie. And I also have to mention, from the beginning, it is absolutely apparent about how crazy the cinematography is, how good this movie looks, quite frankly, and ultimately how well produced this movie is, which is always a nice thing. It's always nice to have a well produced movie that looks absolutely brilliant for you to enjoy. Even if you're not buying into the plot too much, you can still sit back and enjoy what is going on. The villain was brilliant in this movie. He set the scene towards the beginning and essentially began the downfall of Puss in Boots when he essentially presented himself in the bar as a threat, and Puss in Boots was actually afraid of him, fighting against him and ultimately losing, but not really losing much because of the fight, instead kind of just losing mentally and running away, which is something that he's never really done before. In the middle of the movie, I began to understand the plot of the movie a little bit more, you know. I began to understand what Puss in Boots' motivation was to get to this star that the movie's named after, and ultimately what he's driven by to try and get these wishes from this crashed star. It also ties in a lot of the characters that we see within the movie. We got his girlfriend character, and then basically his best friend, which is a dog pretending to be a cat. And I think it's all pretty interesting, and the characters are not annoying. I found them very entertaining and very good to have around in general. Also, it was present that the concept of this movie was a little bit deeper than expected, as I previously mentioned. This movie can be seen as face value by the children and can be essentially seen as a fun movie with a villain that they go overcome essentially, but also entertaining adults and people obviously with a bit of a higher mindset that entertain a little bit more complex plot and movie narrative, but it also entertained them people, you know. I heard adults laughing in this movie because of some of the jokes. I personally laughed out loud at one part of this movie, and I think the comedy hit pretty well, and it also had a well balance between adults and children, which is something that children's movies have to maintain, because if they don't, then the adults ultimately decide whether or not to go back and watch the next one. I also thought the concept of the star was really cool. The map especially was amazing. With each different person viewing the map, it would change the map around them, and that was a really cool concept and played into the plot of the movie, made some obstacles. You know, in movies they have to present obstacles, they have to present problems for the characters to overcome, and the map presented obstacles for the characters, and it wasn't in a way that kind of felt rushed, it wasn't in a kind of cheap way that you normally see in movies. Instead, it was in a way that was entertaining, that was fun, and a cool concept that was believable and not too questionable. The final part of this movie did live up to the rest of the movie. There was a great kind of final fight scene that was super entertaining. There was a final kind of fight between all the people that were building up towards the end of this movie, and that was really enjoyable. And then we had the fight against Puss in Boots and Death, kind of the main villain, the person that's been stalking him for such a long time, and somebody that we knew was going to be the biggest and best challenge that Puss in Boots has ever faced. And he essentially overcame this guy and became the winner, became happy and content and developed as a character because of this villain. And that was really good to see. It was a great conclusion. It tied off all the ends pretty well and left me pretty satisfied with what it essentially came out and did. The ending of movies can be a place where people fumble the bag. They make a great beginning, great middle, and then the execution, the end. And yeah, the final scene was ultimately super entertaining and really enjoyable for all people. And towards the very end, kind of towards the final scenes of the movie, it kind of protruded and presented a new movie, presented a new movie concept, and kind of went towards Shrek and that kind of area once again, because it kind of veered away from that. Shrek wasn't involved in this whatsoever, and it kind of went back to far from home, or far away. I can't remember what it is. As I said, not very up to date with the Shrek lore, but ultimately went back there and set up future movies, which is super important and also very cool and interesting. And Puss in Boots, I believe, said something like this: he was going to visit old friends. That's going to be Shrek or Donkey. And yeah, very interesting. I'm super excited to see what else is created in the Shrek universe. I will get up to date by the next movie. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. Ultimately, I'd give this a 9 out of 10. I think there was some areas to improve. If it was not a kids movie, I would probably give it a 10 out of 10, but because it was, I have to give it a 9 out of 10 because it was a bit too scary. Thank you guys, goodbye.